Hello everyone, and welcome to the Untold Survivor Stories, where the rain falls gently and survival tales help you drift off to sleep. I'm here to lead you through today's story, helping you relax and drift off to sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to hear where you're joining us from and what time it is in your area. Feel free to share in the comments. My name is Elias Thorne, a 32-year-old geologist who's prided himself on a rational mind, grounded in logic and science. The kind of person who scoffs at superstitions, who dismisses ghost stories with a healthy dose of skepticism. I never believed in anything that couldn't be measured, seen, or touched. That was until that night in Havenwood. It started like any other routine trip. My Jeep rattled along the long, isolated roads of the Appalachian foothills, the light drizzle of rain a distant hum against the windshield. But I wasn't prepared for what the storm would throw at me. Somewhere between the twisted, narrow paths, a rogue pothole did what a pothole does best. The Jeep lurched, and before I could regain control, it slammed into the mud, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. The engine sputtered, giving up with a final wheeze. I was miles from the nearest town, with no phone signal, no road assistance, nothing. I stepped out of the Jeep, the wind biting into my skin, and took a look around. The world was swallowed by the storm, rain, wind, and the dark sky swirling like a vortex above. But the strangest part? There was a town in the distance, half hidden by the trees, the faint lights of old street lamps flickering like dying stars in the dark. Havenwood. It looked abandoned. The place felt like something out of a long-forgotten nightmare. Empty streets, buildings with peeling paint, and an unsettling stillness that didn't belong. Yet there were eyes watching me. I could feel it. The few people that walked the streets were gaunt, with deep, hollow eyes, their expressions unreadable. When they noticed me, they whispered among themselves, barely making eye contact. As I walked past, one old man muttered, "Stay clear of Blackwood Station." The mention of Blackwood Station caught my attention. I'd heard of it. There were whispers in the local bars, vague references from truckers who had passed through town. Something about it being haunted. But I dismissed it as nonsense, the kind of local folklore meant to keep strangers away. Ghost stories, like the ones they tell around campfires to frighten kids. This was real life, not some made-up tale. I made my way into a small tavern to ask for directions, ignoring the unease crawling down my spine. The bartender, a woman in her 70s, her face creased with years of worry, glanced at me like she had seen my kind before. "You're not from around here," she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm stranded," I said, my tone casual. "My Jeep broke down a few miles back. How do I get to Blackwood Station?" She paused, setting a glass down slowly, her fingers trembling. "You don't want to go there?" I chuckled, half in disbelief. "I'm a geologist. I've been all over, and I've heard of ghost towns and abandoned places, but nothing that would—" I stopped myself, realizing how ridiculous I sounded. "What's the real story behind it?" She looked around the bar, ensuring no one was listening. The place was mostly empty, the storm keeping most people inside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The train. It only comes when the storm's bad. The Blackwood train, they call it. But it's not like any train, you know. Well, it's not real. Or maybe it's more real than anything else. It feeds on fear, you see. That's why they say the station's cursed. Once you hear the whistle, it's too late." I couldn't help but smile at her ramblings. It sounded like something from a cheesy horror film, the kind they play on late-night TV. "You're telling me the train's haunted?" She met my eyes, her gaze sharp and intense. "It's not the train, it's the fear itself. And that's the most dangerous thing of all." I finished my drink in silence, brushing off her words. I had never been one to succumb to superstition, and I wasn't about to start now. I gave her a polite nod, paid for the drink, and left. The rain had worsened by the time I reached the outskirts of Havenwood. The road was barely visible, and I was grateful for the flashlight I had brought along. The storm didn't let up, the wind howling through the trees like some kind of wild animal. The air felt thick with electricity, a constant crackle in the atmosphere. I finally saw the remnants of Blackwood Station, a decaying shell of a once functional train station. Its skeletal structure groaned under the weight of the storm. The roof had caved in some places, and the windows were shattered, allowing the wind to whistle through the gaps like a banshee. A low hum vibrated through the air, an unnatural sound that seemed to come from within the station itself, adding to the sense of unease that gripped me. The rusted tracks stretched out into the forest, disappearing into the blackness beyond. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to continue my exploration. The flash of my flashlight revealed old signs of life, discarded benches now overtaken by moss and vines, a rusted, forgotten ticket booth that had seen better days. Then I heard it. A distant whistle, long and mournful, slicing through the storm. It was so clear that it stopped me dead in my tracks. My heart thudded in my chest as I instinctively looked toward the sound. The whistle was followed by a low rumble, like a far-off train gathering speed. But there was no train in sight. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of it. The wind howled louder, but the train's whistle didn't fade. It grew more distinct, more pronounced. And then, just as I thought the sound was an illusion, a light appeared. It started small, a dim, unnatural glow, cutting through the rain like a knife through fog. It grew rapidly, brighter, larger, and I realized with a jolt of terror that it was coming toward me. The light wasn't warm like the headlights of a train. It was cold and malevolent, casting long shadows that twisted and writhed on the ground. The train materialized out of the dark, an enormous black silhouette against the storm. Its carriages stretched beyond my vision, a pulsating presence that seemed alive. The train moved without the need for tracks, gliding through the storm like a ghostly leviathan. The air around it seemed to warp and distort, as though reality itself was bending to the will of this malevolent force. At the head of the train stood a figure, gaunt, shadowy, with a face hidden in darkness. The figure's eyes, if they were eyes at all, seemed to lock with mine, a chilling awareness emanating from its form. It wasn't just watching me, it was aware of me. I stood paralyzed, fear gripping my body as the train came closer. The spectral whistle sounded again, louder now, reverberating through my chest, shaking me to my core. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a wave of panic rising within me. This wasn't some trick of the mind. This wasn't a mere story. The Blackwood train was real, and it was feeding off my fear. The cold hand of terror tightened around my throat, threatening to consume me, but something inside me pushed back. I couldn't let this fear overwhelm me. I had to escape. I had to survive. I turned and bolted toward the woods, the flashlight flickering in my trembling hands. The storm intensified, the rain coming down in sheets, but I didn't look back. Every step felt like I was dragging myself through thick mud, the air heavy and thick with a palpable pressure that pushed against me, as though the forest itself was closing in. I pushed forward, focusing only on the path ahead. Then I heard it. The train's roar, its whistle growing louder, its presence drawing closer. The shadows seemed to follow me, creeping between the trees, twisting in the corners of my vision. The storm felt like a living thing, alive with terror. Then it clicked. It wasn't the train that was the true danger. It wasn't even the shadowy figure watching from the train. The true threat was the fear itself. The fear was the one thing that could destroy me. I stopped dead in my tracks. The train's light flickered behind me, but I didn't run. I forced myself to breathe, to slow my pulse. The darkness seemed to watch me, the air thick with anticipation. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed by it any longer. The storm raged around me, but I stood still, confronting the terror that threatened to pull me under. As if sensing my change in resolve, the train slowed. The light dimmed. The whispers that had echoed in the storm began to fade. And then, silence. I took a deep breath, the oppressive weight lifting from my chest. I slowly turned back, glancing at the once menacing train. It was still there, but it no longer loomed with malevolence. It was just a train now, an abandoned relic of the past. I turned away, my legs still weak, but my mind clear. I made my way back toward the shelter I had found earlier, no longer feeling the gnawing presence behind me. The storm was still raging, but I felt an odd calm, a peace that had eluded me just moments before. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds singing, the storm having passed. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and for the first time since arriving in Havenwood, I felt safe. The fear that had gripped me was gone. I never went back to Blackwood Station. The station, the train, the ghostly figure, they stayed in the past, where they belonged. And as I left Havenwood behind, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever chase me again. Dr. Aris Lon, a marine biologist with an expertise in deep-sea creatures, had dedicated his life to studying the ocean's darkest depths. He had spent years mapping the uncharted territories of the deep, uncovering creatures that defied scientific understanding. But nothing in his career had prepared him for the sinking city of Ethelberg. The coastal town, once a thriving hub of culture and commerce, had been slowly overtaken by the relentless advance of the ocean. Over the years, the town had become a ghostly shell of its former self, with buildings submerged beneath the waves, their architecture crumbling, windows and doors gaping like empty sockets. The city, though abandoned, still held secrets, treasures, relics of a civilization long gone, and Aris was determined to uncover them. Joining him was Captain Eva Rostova, a veteran salvage diver with a reputation for navigating the most treacherous underwater environments. Eva's experience in underwater exploration and her uncanny ability to handle high-pressure situations made her the perfect partner for Aris. Together, they led a small team of explorers, each equipped with specialized diving suits and advanced sonar technology, ready to face the dangers of Ethelberg's submerged streets. As their submersible descended through the murky waters, a thick layer of silt clung to the world outside. The light from their equipment cut through the gloom, illuminating the once vibrant city, now swallowed by the ocean. Tall, decaying buildings loomed like skeletal remains, their facades worn by time and the constant assault of salt water. It was beautiful in a melancholic, haunting way, an eerie testament to the forces of nature that had consumed it. "Look at that," Aris murmured, pointing toward a submerged statue. His flashlight illuminated intricate carvings on the stone, its once proud features now softened by the years of exposure to the ocean. This could be a clue to the town's forgotten history, We may be the first to set eyes on this in decades." Ava nodded silently, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She had seen ruins and wrecks before, but there was something about Ethelberg that unsettled her. Something in the silence, the absence of life, felt wrong, but she pushed the unease aside. She was here to do a job, and they had a limited amount of time before the rising tides would make their retreat impossible. As the team ventured deeper into the submerged streets, the sonar began to pick up irregular signals. Initially, the readings were weak, the occasional disturbance in the water, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then, a sudden, sharp spike in the sonar's readings caused the team to pause. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she checked the readings again. The mass moving beneath them was enormous. "That's no fish," she whispered, her voice tight with tension. "That's something else." The sonar indicated a massive life form moving toward them. Its size was mind-boggling. The readings didn't match any known creature. Not a whale, not a shark. The temperature of the surrounding water dropped several degrees, and Eris felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Something was wrong. Then, with a surge of silt, it appeared. A colossal cephalopod, its tentacles thicker than tree trunks, loomed out of the murk, its eyes glowing with a strange, eerie bioluminescence. It was like something out of a nightmare. A living leviathan with immense, deliberate movements. The creature's skin shimmered in the dim light, an iridescent sheen that made it appear almost ethereal. But as it loomed closer, the reality of the situation sank in. This was no mythical kraken. This was a real, terrifying creature. An apex predator adapted to the unique environment of this submerged city. Aris and Eva's hearts raced as they realized the enormity of the creature. The sonar was going haywire, the signal scrambling as the beast's presence interfered with their equipment. The colossal cephalopod was far more advanced than any of the creatures Eris had studied before. It had adapted to its environment in ways that defied conventional understanding, and now it was staring them down as if they were trespassers. The team quickly assessed their situation. They had to retreat. Eris's mind raced as he calculated their best route back to the surface. But before they could react, an underwater current surged unexpectedly, throwing them off course and blocking their escape route. Ava cursed under her breath. "We're trapped. The current's pushing us deeper into the city. We have no way out." Panic began to creep in. The colossal creature, sensing their distress, advanced slowly, its tentacles sweeping through the water like moving walls of flesh. It wasn't moving randomly. No, it was calculating, assessing. It was stalking them. "Think!" Aris shouted, his mind whirring as he tried to come up with a plan. The creature's movements were deliberate, and they knew they had very little time before it would close in on them completely. Ava's sharp eyes darted around, scanning the environment. Her gaze fell on a partially collapsed tunnel leading deeper into the city. It wasn't a perfect escape route. It was narrow, barely wide enough for their suits to fit. But it was the only chance they had. "Over there!" she shouted, pointing. The creature's beady eyes locked onto them, and it began to move faster, its massive body filling the water like a living wall. It wasn't just a creature anymore. It felt like an unstoppable force, a manifestation of the deep, a guardian of this forgotten city. "Go!" Eva barked, her voice sharp with authority. She took the lead, guiding the team toward the narrow tunnel. But as they moved, the creature's tentacles lashed out, swiping dangerously close to their suits. Aris's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced over his shoulder. The creature was right behind them now, its massive tentacles swiping through the water with terrifying speed. The pressure of the water was mounting, and every second felt like an eternity. Just as they reached the tunnel's mouth, the creature surged forward, its glowing eyes narrowing in on them. It seemed to sense their escape attempt. "Ava!" Aris yelled, desperation in his voice. "We need to get in now!" Ava was the first to dive into the tunnel, squeezing her suit through the narrow opening. One by one, the team followed, barely managing to fit through. The creature's tentacles flailed, but it could not follow them into the narrow passage. The roar of the creature's frustrated bellows echoed through the water as they scrambled deeper into the tunnel. The passage twisted and turned, and Eris couldn't help but feel a sense of claustrophobia creeping in as the walls seemed to close in around them. The tunnel was becoming increasingly treacherous, but it was their only way out. But the creature was not easily deterred. Aris triggered the sonic device in his hand, a small but powerful tool designed to disrupt marine life with high-frequency pulses. The sound was almost unbearable to human ears, but it had the intended effect. The creature, disoriented by the pulse, hesitated, its massive form slowing just long enough for the team to push through the tunnel's final stretch. As they emerged into open water, the creature's enraged cries faded into the distance, the pressure in the water easing slightly. They had escaped, but they weren't out of danger yet. The water around them was still churning, the storm above sending ripples through the depths. With the last of their energy spent, they surfaced into the open sea. The team emerged from the water, gasping for breath as they clung to the safety of the dive platform. Shaking, Aris pulled off his mask, his mind still reeling from the experience. The creature, it's guarding the city, the treasure, the secrets. It doesn't want us to disturb it. Ava nodded, her hand steady despite the ordeal. It's not just a guardian. It's a reminder. Some things are meant to stay forgotten. The treasure of Ethelberg remained, still hidden in the submerged city, forever guarded by the Leviathan in the deep. As they made their way back to the surface, shaken but alive, Aris and Ava knew they would never forget the creature, or the city that had almost claimed them. Some secrets, after all, were best left undisturbed in the watery grave of history. Liam had always been a man of plans, a pragmatic engineer with an eye for detail, priding himself on his ability to anticipate and control every aspect of his life. While Maya, on the other hand, was a free-spirited artist, driven more by intuition and whimsy than logic or reason. They couldn't have been more different, but they had been friends for years, ever since college, where their opposites had somehow balanced one another out. This trip was supposed to be a simple getaway, a relaxing vacation to a secluded island in the South Pacific with a group of their closest friends, a break from the mundane, a chance to let go and experience something new. The boat ride started smoothly, the turquoise water stretching out before them like a pristine carpet, the sun warm on their skin, and the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull of the boat, lulling them into a false sense of security. Liam sat at the bow, carefully studying the map, while Maya lounged at the stern, sketching the coastline in her notebook. Their friends, Jenna, a biologist, and Mark, a photographer, taking up the middle, chatting and taking pictures of the crystal-clear water. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed, until, without warning, a squall blew in from nowhere, dark clouds gathering with frightening speed as the wind howled and the boat rocked violently. The water, once calm and inviting, became a roiling mass of frothing waves, Liam's eyes widening as he gripped the sides of the boat, shouting to the others to hold on. But it was no use. The storm was too fierce, too sudden, and a wave struck them broadside, capsizing the boat and throwing them into the frigid waters. Panic setting in immediately as the world became a blur of churning sea, thrashing limbs, and desperate gasps for air. The wind and rain whipping at their faces, and the sound of the storm drowning out everything else. Liam fought against the current, trying to reach the others. Maya already clutching onto a piece of wreckage, her face pale with shock, but her eyes wide with determination. Jenna and Mark had managed to stay together, but the storm was too powerful, too overwhelming, and when Liam finally reached Maya, he pulled her up onto a nearby piece of floating debris, and they clung to it together. It wasn't long before the storm subsided, leaving only the haunting silence of the sea behind, and they were adrift in a vast expanse of water. But in the distance, the silhouette of an island rose from the horizon, a place that could offer shelter, at least for now. By the time they reached the island, exhaustion had settled into their bones, the remnants of the storm hanging in the air, the humid tropical heat a stark contrast to the frigid waters they had just escaped, and the island was lush, an almost oppressive green that seemed to grow in every direction. The trees towering above them, their leaves forming a dense canopy that allowed only the faintest glimmers of sunlight to filter through. The ground beneath their feet damp and spongy, the air thick with the scent of decay. "We need to find shelter," Liam said, ever the planner, beginning to survey the area, trying to determine the safest course of action. "We'll need fresh water and food, and we need to make a shelter before nightfall." Maya, always the impulsive one, was already wandering off, her eyes catching the strange glow of bioluminescent plants that dotted the forest floor. "This place is incredible," she murmured, her voice full of awe. "I think there's something here, something magical." Liam shot her a skeptical glance but said nothing. He didn't believe in magic or the supernatural. He believed in cold, hard facts. And right now, the fact was they were stranded on an unknown island, with no way of knowing if anyone else had ever set foot here. But Maya was already lost in her world, bending down to examine the glowing plants, her fingers brushing against the delicate leaves that seemed to pulse with life. The rest of the group caught up with them, Mark and Jenna scanning the area as well. "This place is strange," Jenna said, her voice tight with uncertainty. "The plants, the trees, nothing looks quite right." "I know," Liam said. "That's why we need to stay focused. We'll figure out what's going on here later." But the unease in the air was palpable, and it wasn't just the strange plants. The island was quiet, too quiet, with no wildlife, no birds singing in the trees, or animals scurrying through the underbrush. The only sound was the wind rustling through the leaves, a sound that seemed to whisper to them, and Maya shivered involuntarily, a feeling of being watched crawling up her spine.